Ladies and gentlemen, open banking pioneers, hello and good afternoon. It's great to be back around the virtual campfire with you all today. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, we've a huge amount of ground to cover and the clock is ticking. I will talk to you a little bit more about that in a moment. Now, as I was just saying in the green room, our last campfire received over 11,000 views already on YouTube. And I believe our topic today, consumer duty, will absolutely smash that. With your help, please. It's been almost 2 years since the FCA proposed a new consumer duty that sets, and I quote, higher and clearer standards of customer protection across financial services. Now, earlier this month, FCA Executive Director Sheldon Mills said that consumer duty will, and again I quote, help UK firms flourish, that's a cool word, and remain world-leading proponents of financial services. And it makes us all think harder about innovating and competing to find better ways to serve customers. And I think it's the better ways to serve customers that we should all be underlining. Now, once again, the UK is leading the way in taking decisive action to deliver better customer outcomes to our 52 million financial services customers. That's across the UK. We've heard consumer duty described as a £97 billion golden opportunity. Yeah, why is that? Well, because as the FCA notes, 9.7 million of British adults who have 10k or more in investable assets hold more than 75% of that in cash. So consumer duty means quite simply that financial products become less complex and importantly, less intimidating, potentially encouraging those 9.7 million adults to take their money out from underneath the mattress and invest it into our world-leading financial services firms. It just makes sense, yeah? Now, back to the clock ticking bit. Firms have less than 90 days to meet the deadline for this implementation. Now, this is no small task because every product is still open for renewal or accepting money now must comply. And at OBE, we are running a countdown across all of our channels, so please tune in. Consumer duty requires firms to put their customers' needs first and avoid foreseeable harm throughout the life cycle of their products. The focus is on driving better outcomes. That sounds very uncontroversial. Surely we all want good outcomes for our customers. But there are still many difficult questions around consumer duty. Which products are covered by the new rules? Who decides what good looks like? And what kind of sanctions even will the FCA deem proportionate to firms that do not comply to their new regulations? Now, these are just some of the questions that we will be wrestling with as we approach the go live date, and some of them still remain unanswered. And that's why we have put together our absolutely amazing panel today. It is my absolute privilege to introduce you to our host, Simone, Senior Editor at the FT Advisor. She will start with a fireside chat with Sam Seton, who's the CEO of Money Hub, and she's really a consumer duty champion. And she's driving this conversation forward. You may have seen Sam on our LinkedIn with her fabulous 101 of consumer duty with her horse, Ludico. So please take a look. But for now, Simone, I am delighted to pass the mic over to you.
Thank you very much. And it is a pleasure and a privilege to be invited to talk to all of you here today. Thank you very much. As mentioned, we're going to be kicking off our time together with a short chat between myself and Sam Seton. No horses here, unfortunately, because it's virtual and horses don't like Zoom. And then we're going to open this up to a wider panel session. Sam, it's really good to see you again.
It's fantastic to see you too, even if it's in Zoom mode.
I know. Well, we're all used to this now post-pandemic, aren't we? So are you excited about the upcoming regulations? Are we going to flourish?
We are going to flourish. I mean, anything and any time we focus on the consumer, the world is a better place, right?
Well, yes. And it seems certainly when it comes to consumer duty, people have been looking at it, and some of my readers have been looking at it and saying, well, I've already done what's right for the consumer. So perhaps, I've already read this book. I don't need to read it again. Some others are highlighting passages again and again and really going over it with a fine-tooth comb. So what is the story so far with Consumer Duty? Spoilers are totally welcome.
Well, I think the real story is we've only just started. I think because, you can't really have legislation that comes in such a short window and have the entire industry overnight ready for something as significant and transformative as what Consumer Duty is going to be for the consumer. And although there's been an awful lot of work by a lot of firms to get ready, I don't think anyone is under any illusion that this is a journey that we're on. But I think with the most positive takeaway to start with is the fact that it's focused firms on the customer. So actually really genuinely made them take a step back and think about whether they really do put the customer first. And I know that some firms get a little bit upset because they're like, but all I do is service my customer. That is the whole focus of what I do. But I think what Consumer Duty has made everyone do is just take that holistic view, because it's the first time that product providers have had to now take the responsibility of ensuring that the consumers or customers that they're responsible for and the products that they've got, they're actually always in the most appropriate product that they have for their customers. Never before have you had to, as a company, have the application or the initial suitability assessment being done. And then, to be honest, 24/7 for the next 20, 30 years that you have the customer in that product, you need to keep doing that check. And we all know that, not every day does a product become unsuitable for a customer, but certainly it won't be the most suitable product for that customer for 20 or 30 years. It's not possible. Nothing wrong with the product, but, people change, their lives change, products evolve. And I think that's the biggest shift we're going to see, is that people who genuinely, we can't keep up with all the products that come out. Consumers are left, massively adrift in this. No longer. I mean, actually, the shift about ongoing suitability is now with the product providers.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that sort of obligation on financial services providers, especially the ones that haven't started talking to their compliance teams yet. Let's talk a little bit more in depth about these obligations, because it's not just assessing, well, ongoing service, maybe we'll send out a newsletter or something to a client once a year. There's a whole lot more to it than that, isn't there?
There is. So I think, let's take a really simple example, which I think helps people to understand, I think, the significance of this. So, you might just have customers in a really simple current account that you're, taking £15 a month to service because they get some online benefits, some additional benefits in terms of maybe their, their AA cover or roadside assistance, some insurance that's thrown in the mix, the little packaged account that you've got. And you're paying £15 a month for that. But actually, when you started off with that product, it was perfect. And then, through no fault of your own and the product providers, you may now just have, moved to Europe, for example, and you've still got your UK bank account, right? And unfortunately, there's no way that UK bank account is relevant to you anymore. And the reason I bring this up is because that £15 a month will mount up quite quickly. And that is £15 a month that consumer could have had that money working for them, maybe in one of your savings products, for example, rather than the current account. And I know a lot of people say, oh, yes, but, if you move to Europe, that's not my fault as the product provider, surely. And I'm like, it is, because they're still your customer. So we just take simple things like that. I think the thing that you've got to really watch out for personally is financial harm, financial detriment. Because if actually you have all these customers, and we know, that people have between 5 and 9 financial products in their lives at any one time. If you're only down by 10 or 15 pounds a month in a few of those products, times by, what is it, Helen, 52 million people, that's a huge amount of financial harm that's going on that we now have to stop.
And adding charges, etc., onto that as well for certain products.
Yeah.
So what will Consumer Duty then mean for customers? I mean, in my conversations with financial advisors, once actually said to me, I hope that my consumers don't see a difference because I want them to know that I've always been doing this for them. And by the way, this advisor is fully compliant, really going through absolutely everything with a very fine-toothed comb. but they're saying they hope their clients don't say, oh, suddenly I'm getting serviced really, really well or serviced differently. But, should consumers see a difference?
I think consumers will definitely see a difference. So you're right. There are some firms out there that are very good, but I think probably what we've underestimated is the level of care that we're going to need to give consumers. So my suspicion is even the best of us out there in the industry have not anticipated the level of intervention the FCA is expecting. So, just take any financial advisor or, are they, surfacing interventions when I change my life skills, at the point that intervention is required. So, if I'm slightly off target on what we agreed in terms of my retirement goal and my savings, do I get an intervention to say, Sam, you're a little bit off on that target at the moment. So, it's okay. But, if you're any further off, we're going to chat further about this. I don't think we're in the mode of proactive interventions. And I think that's the big thing that we're going to see in a few years' time. We'll all look back and realize that, the level of communication that we get is going to be in a different league.
And I take it you've already started thinking about that communication element and how you communicate to clients, not just the frequency, but how you do it as well. But how else are you changing your proposition as a result of the incoming duty?
Well, so even Money Hub, our business is actually caught, if you like, by Consumer Duty in terms of our AIS and PIS permissions, so our aggregation services and our payment services. We, even just with those FCA regulated products, must make sure that, they are value for money for our clients and that they actually do offer, a fully serviced brief, if you like, of what it does, how it does it, why it's doing it. And also, to be honest, could we do any more, especially when it comes to vulnerable customers? So, for example, could we use our aggregation and payments capability to actually surface and make it easier for our clients to actually help their customers? That is the spirit of Consumer Duty. So not the letter of the law, but the spirit is, what can you do as a business that will help, either directly the customer or to the business that you service for them to help their customer? So that's something that I think, all companies should do. But of course, with my obsession about the customer, it's something that, we at Money Hub have really put an awful lot of thought into.
Yeah, I really like what you said about could we do more? And you're obviously thinking about that at Money Hub. What practical steps can financial services providers take now to do more for their customers?
So I think the only thing you need to do really is genuinely put yourself in the shoes of your customer. So if you are the recipient of a mortgage or an investment account or a retirement account, it doesn't really matter what the product is, critical illness insurance. But if for just a moment you step into the shoes of the customer and think, right, this is the product that I'm getting, what would I expect to get now from my own business that I would find incredibly insightful or useful? And I mean, one that's really, there's some such quick wins to me. I mean, take overdrafts. I don't think people realize that actually for certain segments of the community that are struggling with, overdrafts, the banks have an enormous amount to offer in terms of, for example, quite often the first £500 is interest-free. They've got all these different services they offer, but I'm telling you, none of us know about it. It's on their websites, it's buried. So it's not that they don't offer them, it's not that they don't care, but the connection between things that you need and what is available from the very companies that are servicing you is like polar apart. Yeah. Well, we'll see all that join up, which is brilliant, isn't it? Because things that companies are doing already for the benefit of the consumer will actually benefit the consumer because they're suddenly going to know about it. So I think, there's some really quick wins to be had.
Yeah, and it's about that sort of plain English, almost seeing things from the consumer's perspective, isn't it? Because we all work in financial services, we're used to jargon, we're used to doing things in a certain way, we're used to sort of words meaning a different thing in a regulated context than perhaps they mean outside of a regulated context. But the average layperson, a teacher, a fire person, a police officer, they're not going to necessarily know all this jargon means. And as you say, if things aren't surfaced well on the internet, how do they even know what they're meant to be searching for? And so it just seems that the communication of consumer duty is almost as important as actually fulfilling all the obligations under consumer duty itself.
I completely agree. And that's why I think we haven't started yet. So we talk about the journey that we're on. It is a journey, but, imagine all of us, just on this panel or the audience, we're all going to fall off our chairs, aren't we? When we get a little intervention or a little nudge from someone telling us that, do you know that actually we've got another account where you could earn this amount of money? And would you like to find out more about it? Because that's music to all of our ears, because there's no way we can be on the internet searching for all of this all the time. It's just not possible. So I'm very excited about, my first intervention that I'm going to get.
I like the sound of it. Well, we've only got sort of 90 days before people start thinking about how they're going to do these interventions for customers. But are there any sort of other practical steps that financial services providers can be doing right now to make sure they're ready for go live?
So I always say to anyone that's at this stage that the focus should really be on financial harm. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that the customers you're servicing are not worse off in the products that they're currently in. So that's personally where I, if you don't feel quite prepared or you're not sure, I say just start by that. Just think to yourself, is someone going to be down each month if they remain in a current account when they should have that money in a savings account, when they're in a cash ISA and maybe they should actually be considering an investment ISA? Just genuinely just use common sense and look for that financial harm, because I think really intervening about financial harm will stand your business in good stead, in terms of, the regulator, but also I think, the customer will just be hugely, hugely appreciative of just that one intervention that you might make for them.
Absolutely. Now, we have got a little bit of time just before we go into the panel session, and a question has come in from the virtual floor. What should companies do if they haven't prepared adequately for the duty yet? I'm sure this is entirely hypothetical. Should they be worried? That's a very good point, isn't it, Sam? Because sometimes fear almost makes us not do anything because we don't even know where to start.
So, I mean, I think if you're at this stage and you haven't done anything, you should definitely be worried. And I know that people believe that the FCA will start, with, in effect, the big guns in the industry, and so they probably feel they've got a little bit of time up their sleeve. But I personally think that that is not in the spirit of consumer duty. So I would be wary if that is the approach you're taking, because I feel that in a couple of years' time, it could catch you out. And particularly if you've got clients or customers that are in products where it is, demonstrable financial harm in a couple of years' time, I personally, that's the position I really wouldn't want to be in. So I'd say, yes, if you haven't done anything, you've got 90 days, have a little panic. And then, just like your homework, your GCSEs, your A-levels, you know what to do, dust off the books, and get on with it, really. Yeah.
Get some Red Bull down you. That's fine.
Yeah.
No, I mean, but it's a serious point, and there is a wealth of information out there. I mean, we just had the Consumer Duty Alliance launch in March. Plenty of information out there for companies, small or large, if they haven't quite grasped all the finer details yet. That's certainly, there is information out there to find, right, Sam?
Yeah, there's loads of information, but on top of that, do you know what? Even if you don't, you feel overwhelmed by all of that information, if you just think to yourself, I just need to make sure that my customers are in products that are suitable for them. I mean, it's not rocket science. If you start with that very simple premise and then think to yourself as well, don't think to yourself about all the work this is going to take and the cost. Think to yourself that anything you do to meet that need of the customer will make you invaluable to that customer. So this is investing in your business. And I'm a big believer in the fact that the businesses that will be successful in the future are those that invest in the customer, and those that are consumer focused. And also, we talked about, Davos, the last couple of economic forums that have been held, a little bit of a joke that they say, that the new currency isn't actually cryptocurrency, it's actually trust. Yeah. So trust is massive. So this is such a window to build real trust with your customers again, to a different level, even if you already have their trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust has got to be the bedrock of everything. Knowing your customer, knowing your client. This is really sort of taking it onto a whole new level. Sam, thank you so much for that really excellent bit of scene setting. Let's go over to our panel. They're sort of waiting in the wings, as it were. I don't know what it's called on Zoom. Green room, is that what they're calling it now? And we're going to discuss some of these ideas a bit more broadly. So joining us is Aman Verk. She's the Customer Transformation Senior Director, FinTechs for Salesforce. We also have Helene Oga-Zahir. She's the Manager of Market Analysis and Policy at the FCA. And we've got some questions coming in for the FCA already, Helene, you'll be very pleased to know. And it's Anne Godbold. She is the Non-Financial Risk Specialist with a focus on regulatory and conduct risk at Accenture. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. So we can see some of our team here. Just sort of thinking a little bit about FT Advisor's own audience. Some are taking consumer duty very, very, very seriously. Others think they've got all the requirements down pat, but what's the reality across financial services? So let's just start. Well, I'll start with Aman and then go to Anna. And if anyone else wants to jump in, please do. How ready are financial services companies for the change? And are there any common areas that need to be addressed? I'll start with you, Aman.
Great, thank you. And great insight, Sam. Thank you so much. I think we've spent some time with various clients and customers, and I think people are on different journeys. So they're all in different places in terms of confidence levels and delivery as well. And I think it does vary depending on the size of the organisation, the amount of resource they have, and the focus they're placing on it. I think what's common in terms of starting point, I think majority of firms spent quite a lot of time identifying requirements, identifying the minimum viable requirements that they needed to deliver by the end of July. And I think that was fairly consistent across the board. And some people have got some help and got support to validate those requirements as well. I think the other common thread that we've seen is that people are identifying high-risk customer journeys. So in terms of the prioritization exercise, I think there has been recognition that they need to focus on the harms and the really high-risk journeys as well, and invest in terms of improving outcome testing and compliance and reporting. I think what's missing and what's been missing for me, and I think where the gap is probably the proactive engagement. I'm not necessarily seeing that many firms step into the proactive engagement piece and look at their data and analytics and machine learning capabilities to see how they can really understand their customer, the customer base, the target market audience, the vulnerabilities, and also look at how they can utilize things like their transactional data or voice and text analytics to step in to understand when circumstances change and how they can proactively intervene and provide support. I think there's some firms are looking at this and but they don't know where to start. Their data's in different places. They don't know how to bring all of that data together. But I think it's more of a longer term strategy rather than a implementation date focus. I think, and again, there's been mixed focus around sort of like employee engagement as well. I spoke to a firm this week who they said they're sort of like frontline staff at the moment don't know much about consumer duty. They've got compulsory training coming, but it's that compulsory training piece rather than really embedding the understanding within the culture of the organisation. So I personally believe that majority have got still a lot to do, and they'll still have a lot to do post-implementation. I think personally what I'd like to see is that this doesn't become one of those we have to do it, it's we want to do it. And I think that's where I'd really like to see the shift, and I don't think we're feeling that necessarily yet. I'm hoping that it will come as this evolves.
That's quite worrying when you say a lot of frontline staff don't even know what it is yet, but they've got training coming, 90 days to get trained up on something that's absolutely sort of regulatory and imperative, but also could be life-changing for millions of customers. That's quite worrying. I'm going to go to you now, Anne, because I could see you nodding along to what Aman was saying. There's clearly quite a lot of points that resonated with you.
I love the journey analogy, and I feel like that's something that's going to repeat throughout this. It was a big ask when the guidance came out. There is a lot there, and we are trying to shift from treating customers fairly in conduct to a whole new level of customer centricity. And that is difficult. So absolutely, the clients that I see, I think they're going to be substantially ready for July. They've done a lot of work to get where they're going to be, but it was a really big ask. It's a really big ask, especially if you're looking at bringing in new data streams, changing your processes, changing your systems and technology. They just haven't necessarily had that time to do that. And then embedding, where you get your people to really understand what is expected of them, that takes time. So it's absolutely a journey. Some of the areas that we see that are the most complicated are around customer communications. It really does feel like a paradigm shift from a clear, fair and not misleading where we are today to a place where actually your average customer can understand it and can take the right action. It's a brilliant piece of requirement. I think it's really going to mean a lot to a lot of different people and really help get the right products, the right guidance and the right support at the right times. But it's hard to do. And when we look at evidencing and monitoring, we all know when we were delivering conduct MI, that took us a long time to get that right. What we're looking to do now is way above that. And have firms really got new data today in order to deliver that? No, probably because they haven't yet made all of those changes, and it does take time. So they'll be going on a journey to improve, to really understand what this means. And they're watching the regulatory guidance really closely to understand what good looks like and where they should be, and to really drive that change into their business. And I guess I feel quite comfortable with that. I feel like this is the right direction for our firms. It's going to really improve the outcomes for customers. And so the fact that it's complicated and going to take some time, that feels okay. That feels right. Moving from a product guide to a customer-centric guide is a complete shift in mindset. And we all need to learn, what does that really mean and what does it require to deliver that?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with you for a second, Anne, because another question has just come in, I think probably building a lot on what you have both been saying. Talking about a journey, it might also be a never-ending journey or a never-ending story. Is compliance with this duty an impossible task for big firms? How can they possibly assess harm when considering millions and millions of customers? Is that something that some of your clients have mentioned to you?
No one has said this is impossible. And I think that's really important to guide that. Like, our clients do tend to be those larger firms, and actually a lot of them are energized by this. There's an excitement about getting the right outcome for the customer and what this might mean. That doesn't mean they've cracked this yet. It is super complex to deliver this in a large firm. You have different business units, completely different product sections, product heads, completely different systems and data. It's not, as Aman's mentioned, it's not all integrated. Doing this in a short period of time has a level of complexity, especially with all the dependencies between the various work streams, that is hard to work through. And I guess what's important to know is they've done a lot of work, and yes, they're going to continue to do a lot of work from July, but I think they are in a place where they feel comfortable, they're substantially there. That focus on proactivity, I haven't really yet seen that come. Starting to have those conversations is definitely coming next about what that next evolution looks like and how you really get the right outcome faster, quicker to the client.
Fantastic. That's a really, really good answer. And I like the fact you say it's not impossible. Yes, it's a big journey. It's a difficult journey, but it's not impossible. So whoever asked that question, I hope you take away some comfort from that. I do want to go to Helene at the FCA very quickly, but I want to know if any of the panel wanted to jump in at this point.
Well, I just want to jump in on that. How is it going to be measured? And I think, it's not difficult to measure the impact. I mean, with the amount of data that we've got available now between many firms, but if you just think about something that we did recently, just to put it in context of how easy it is to have a look at your data, we analysed 3,000 instant savings accounts for one of the institutions on their data that they provided, and they had between £100 and 1.6 million in these accounts, in these savings accounts, and they were instant savings accounts. And what was discovered with the algorithms and the technology running over those accounts in milliseconds was that 24% of those people using those instant savings accounts were only withdrawing money once every 350 days. So they were using that instant savings account, I don't know, to save for a holiday that they pay for once a year or Christmas, but like an annual event, which is probably not the purpose of an instant savings account, right? So, red flag straight away there. And the other one that was more staggering was that there was 32% of people that had so much money in their instant savings accounts and had not accessed those savings accounts for more than 12 months.
Right.
That
Be
need
better off in an ISA or something.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is like that. You get this information. Well, you take that data, you multiply it by how many customers you've got, and you've instantly got an assessment of the impact or issue that you've got that you need to think about solving. So I don't think it's difficult.
No, that's a really interesting perspective. Thank you ever so much. And I'm very curious now to hear from Helene, who can give the regulator's perspective. Helene, are firms looking at the consumer duty principles with this mixture of fear or concern, or can they look at it as a way of maybe preparing their business for longevity and success?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And I have to say a lot of what I've heard today, I found really positive and encouraging. So I think what I wanted to do, because we are here in the context of open banking as well, and I wanted to start with that before turning into the consumer duty and its application in the context of open banking.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to start by saying open banking and broader sharing of financial data absolutely has the potential to transform how people manage their finances and make payments. And we have seen to date, the UK has been a success story. And of course, it has grown from 1 to over 7 million active users today. In parallel with that, and in parallel with our continuing engagement and our willingness and our drive to ensure that open banking continues to grow as in the interest of consumers and businesses, as a regulator, we also, of course, have another key regulatory focus, that is the consumer duty, which we've been talking about today, and which is the main topic. And central to every product and services is consumer. I'm sure that's not it's not something that we can argue against. The consumer duty, of course, will require firms to provide positive outcomes for consumers who use open banking products and services. And that applies to all participants in the open banking journey. Then we have to think the duty requires firms to act to deliver good outcomes for customers with cross-cutting rules to achieve the outcomes relating to products and services, outcomes related to price and value, consumer understanding, and consumer support. If we go back and we think back about what open banking is and the examples, the innovation that we have seen coming through open banking, a lot of the examples are very much aligned with what the consumer duty is trying to do. All of this is in the interest of consumers and businesses in many cases when we think about open banking. So I think getting the implementation of the consumer duty right will absolutely help firms to deepen their trust with customers. I've heard that word quite a bit with others in the panel today. And I think it will help firms to deliver better outcomes for end users and businesses. And to my mind, that means that really it is in their interest, in all firms' interest, if they want their businesses to last. Because you cannot last if you're not thinking about consumers and if you don't remain agile about consumers. And I see that there is a question somewhere here around kind of whether those are too high-level principles and rules and requirements when we think about consumer duty. I think it's really important that we focus on outcome, and that's really what we are trying to do here. So by definition, it means that we will not be overly precise or detailed. But I think that's really important because we need to remain agile. firms need to remain agile too, because things change, conditions, circumstances of consumers change, etc., etc. So what it means today might change with the evolution of the business later.
Yes, of course. And I think, what you're saying there, if it's outcomes focused and it's the customer's outcome on which firms should focus, they can't just treat this as a tick box exercise, because what might be relevant right now, or sort of on the 1st of August of this year, might not be relevant even on the 1st of September, let alone next year or the year after. So you really have to follow the spirit of the law here, I think. But it can be quite frustrating. If I can just stick with you a bit, Helene, there have been concerns raised. There were the questions raised with the Treasury Select Committee, and some MPs have raised these questions as well, as to how will the FCA sort of deal with maybe spurious complaints about outcomes? Is there such a thing as a spurious complaint under Consumer Duty? Do we expect perhaps be overwhelmed by complaints about some nebulous outcome that perhaps people expected or didn't expect? And how do firms go about managing clients' expectations so that we minimize the amount of complaints coming through? That's a big question.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it is about minimizing complaints that come through, but it is certainly about explaining, being quite transparent and explaining in simple terms what things mean, what a product might mean, what are the impacts on consumers, and when they are trying to understand, or maybe they have circumstances that change, make sure that they are listened to. So I think to my mind, is it a big project? Yes. It's cross-cutting, so it means it goes across all firms. Forget open banking for a second, of course. It goes across every sector that we regulate as FCA. But it is about us being ready for implementation, I think, and supervising firms as we would normally do in their implementation of that principle and of those rules.
Can I just throw it open to the rest of the panel here? How do you feel about sort of that spirit of fulfilling the spirit of the law? How you focus on outcomes? Is anyone going to be brave enough to? I could volunteer people. See, I've got the advantage of seeing everyone in the green room, and you can only see me on the screen. Might just pick on Sam because she's there. I can see her. She looked at me. She volunteered herself. How can we focus on the spirit of the law here?
Well, I think focusing on the spirit is just basically putting the consumer at the heart of everything we do now, which is actually a big shift, because I think a lot of people in financial services work for firms where they're still product-led. So that, I think, is the big challenge at a more holistic level for us, is moving from a product-led business to a truly customer-centric business. And people believe they're customer-centric, but actually it's not holistic. And that's the big shift that we're going to have to take, and so that to me is the big ask, really.
Yeah, and I guess if we have really good data, well, actually all firms have data, we just don't always know how to use it, but we have this data which I'm sure is just going to underpin absolutely everything. And obviously we talked about data and existing legislation and how things interact. We've talked about this a few times, but how are we sort of looking at new data sources as part of the compliance regime? And, how do you sort of see the role of technology and innovation in helping firms meet the requirements of Consumer Duty? So that to Anne, and then see if anyone else would like to dive in.
So our firms do have a lot of data. We know that they segment their customers at the moment for marketing purposes, for PRIPs, for various reasons. But it doesn't necessarily translate into delivering customer centricity. So we just took the traditional customer segments that we're all so used to. That's based on normally simple demographic data, age, income, education. But how often does the bank really know what your financial objective is, what you're trying to do? Have they ever reached out to you before you're about to buy a house to talk about mortgages? Have they really understood what you're saving for, what your targets are? And probably no is the answer. They've never really got that right, thinking about what your needs are over your life. And actually now, the FCA has been really clear. It's talked a lot more about granular data, and I think they're really nudging firms to really rethink this and really think about making sure they've understood those customer groups in a way that is useful, like thinking about the jobs to be done, what their objectives are, and thinking about actually how do you help them at the right point in the journey. What I am excited about is the innovation to come, but I also want to be really clear. Today, most of our firms are really working on getting the backbone in place. So using the data that they've got at the moment in order to monitor this. They haven't yet got to the place where they're starting to, or they're implementing new data sources. That is to come, and that is the journey. But I think what is going to come is, I think they're really going to start to think about how do they capture more data that's useful, really understanding what their customer wants in the journey. So that might be really looking at, on the unlearn journey, where do they get stuck? How long are they taking? What are they doing? Where do they go next when they're navigating to pages to actually really understand what they're trying to do? It might be, if they call the contact center, that they're adding in questions to really understand what that customer is about, and they're using it and tagging that data in a way that can be used more effectively. And I'm also starting to see firms just asking about actually things like generative AI. How can they use all of this unstructured data they've got and actually understand and be more customized in how they respond to the customer to really give them the right information at the right time effectively. A lot of this work could drive a lot of cost for our bigger clients because asking questions, implementing new software in order to tag, you could push out the customer journeys in the contact center by a long time. And you haven't necessarily always got the colleagues there trained up, ready to go. And you haven't always got the margin on all of these products to deliver that. So unless they innovate and they use their data effectively, actually, they're really going to struggle to do that. So it's a win-win, hopefully, to see that change come in place.
And you're right, and there's that longevity of data as well, because as we know, clients don't always tend to chop and change. We very rarely switch banks, we very rarely switch energy providers, despite all the interesting stuff that was happening in 2022 with energy prices. As a nation, we're quite inert. We stick with the provider that we've had for years and years. And then how are they sort of adapting on the journey? How are they presenting to that presenting that information back to us in a way that we can understand and then use to improve our own sort of financial well-being? I'm going to sort of move on to sort of open banking, because I think in a way open banking has already tackled a lot of these issues. So if I can sort of bring Sam back into the virtual room, as we say, so how can consumer duty apply in the context of open banking, and how can we see this digital innovation kind of expand to really sort of do what Anna was saying, like keep that customer journey going throughout the years?
Well, I think it's something that we need to embrace now. We've kind of put it to one side a little bit, I think, open banking as being this area that we don't need to worry about, because it's, to be honest, it's people's current accounts and their credit cards. But I think what we're underestimating at our peril is the amount of data that informs, the insight it gives about our customers, because it is actually almost like the heartland of the customer, because you can see what people are doing with their money, which fundamentally informs, for example, like Anne was saying about the goals. You can even, the conclusions you can draw from what someone's doing with their money informs you so well. And this can be all automated. I mean, this is why I think the FCA is mentioning the fact that there is this legislation in place around open banking. And let's not forget the Smart Data Bill, which had its second reading in Parliament a few weeks ago, which is moving on to mortgages, savings, investments, the utility bills, the energy companies you mentioned, Simone, and also the mobile phone contract providers. All of that will be caught up in the same, data provision and sharing that the open banking kind of remit has got at the moment. And so I guess what I would say to everyone is, I think you should be looking at open banking in a way to help you provide the automated insight you're going to need in order to provide ongoing suitability, those interventions when you need to step back in, because the data will tell you. You don't need to be talking to your customer all the time, actually. I mean, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing if you want to, but what I'm getting at is, if you've got millions of customers, or you want millions of customers, and you want to keep them all happy, you're going to have to use the data and technology to do that for you, so that you can automate that, and it's all there.
Absolutely. I can see both Helene and Aman sort of nodding there. Helene, would you like me to bring you in, and we can go to Aman to wrap up this particular section?
I was just going to say I agree very much with Sam, and this is why I was trying to say there is real alignment between open banking, the objectives of open banking, what we're trying to do, and thinking beyond. So open banking technology, thinking beyond open banking current scope to kind of open finance and beyond. It's a lot about this, better understanding, enabling consumers, giving them the tools to be better informed, to better understand, to make different choices, etc., etc. So I think there is a real closeness in terms of spirits, if you like, and I think there is also a lot of relevance when you think about it from a technology perspective and how one can support the other.
I think again, I think just to add to that, I think so like for me, it's about creating those connected experiences and personalization. And I think when we look at data and technology, I think both of them have got a big role to play, because if you get your data right, you structure it in the right way, you've got it all in one place, you can create that single view of the customer. And over time, you build that picture. You build that picture in terms of their ambitions, their financial goals, their circumstances, and then you're able to identify when changes happen and can trigger those interventions that we've been talking about. I mean, for example, if you lost your job tomorrow and your salary is not going into your account, your bank will know potentially that you've lost your job before you even tell them. So there's opportunities there, I think, for the bank to step in. You might be start receiving benefit payments, and that's a real trigger. Should they be, could they, for example, start directing you to money management tools, so you have tailored marketing journeys, or they're nudging you if you're about to go into, sort of like overdraft or incur a fee or charge, or actually even proactively outreach to do assessments, so that you're using that data really creatively to create those personalized experiences for customers. And I think data and technology underpin all of that. Particularly data, I think, is critical for all of this, but it's the utilization. So you can have the data, and it can be we were talking earlier that we know sort of like on average companies have about 1,000 applications, so you have data all in different places. How do you bring all of that together and then really utilize it in the right way to really support customers, but also enable them on their journeys?
Yeah, in fact, you're so right there. There's so much data from so many different elements within a firm or on its own. Sometimes you kind of want everyone to just kind of aggregate it. Someone here on the floor has actually asked, what new data sources can firms draw on now, and which others will emerge in the future? I'm assuming that the majority of new data sources will be the firm's own customer data that it has taken. But are there any sort of aggregation tools or sort of software providers that sort of can help, particularly small businesses perhaps, that are trying to do all this themselves without having a big data team? Don't know if anyone wants to chip in there. We went to Sam, but we didn't. Anne, you've got.
So I'm definitely seeing firms really think more about how they use what they've collected so far. It's amazing how much data you can have and not make the best of it. And I think some of the technologies that have come in the last 12 to 18 months can unlock it in a way that hasn't been possible. So generative AI, for example, really making use of the notes, for example, in your contact center that's been recorded, and actually putting out themes, categorizing it. Those use cases there can be really powerful for actually understanding what your customer is doing. We've also seen firms using tagging technology in a journey, which has been there a while, but they're starting to think about it in a different way, not from a marketing perspective, but actually even spotting indicators of vulnerability, for example. I do think we can't get away from, there could be some information that we just don't have and people need to ask. That's annoying because it's difficult always to reach your customers. You need to think about how to do that in the right way, how to ask what could be quite difficult questions to get that insight, but actually to help and to build trust, you need to do that. And then open banking data hasn't actually been used by many of our larger banking clients in a way that we would have liked and that we imagined when this first came through. And I'm hoping that we're reaching a point where now we can see some of the things, these use cases, the ways you can use it. We're really thinking about suitability, really thinking about that holistic review, that we'll start to see them exploiting that in a way that really delivers for the customer.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about use cases. Sort of what sort of impacts on businesses and customers are you expecting, and sort of how are firms responding? I think I'll start actually with the FCA. Sort of, have you got sort of guidance around this?
I was going to talk a little bit about open banking and I suppose the application of consumer duty in relation to open banking. I think it's perhaps, we've talked about it already, in terms of there's less than 3 months to implement the duty. So now is time for action if it hasn't already taken place. So in open banking, firms should and must ensure that their consumers understand the nature of the service and what they are consenting to when they allow open banking firms to access their accounts. So as part of the duty's consumer understanding outcome, we want consumers to be given the right information at the right time, presented in a way that they can understand. And it is primarily the third-party provider or the open banking firm's responsibility to make this available to customers. And that includes the information customers need to make an informed decision around how that payment account data is going to be used, and for example, whether it's going to be shared with any third parties. In addition, under the consumer duties cross-cutting rules, firms must also act to enable and support customers to pursue their financial objectives. So what does it mean? It means that firms, for instance, can support customers in pursuing those objectives by designing and delivering consumer support in a way that does not create unreasonable barriers, and ensuring that the channels of support they provide work effectively and do not act as a barrier to customers utilizing these products. And in an open banking customer journey, which is quite interesting and slightly different perhaps to other types of journey when we think about financial services, it means really that both banks and other account providers that provide access to these open banking firms to provide products and services to these customers. It means that both in some shape or form should enable and support customers to pursue those financial objectives. I think what is quite important to say in the context of open banking is that the consumer duty doesn't change the existing requirements for the different parties within open banking. So, for instance, it doesn't change the fact that TPP should be able to access customers' account without unnecessary delay or friction. That being said, firms like banks must also avoid causing foreseeable harm to customers. So, for instance, if they identify a risk of fraud with a specific payment transaction, they may decide to stop that payment and not to execute it for that reason. So it'll be really important to ensure that the balance that exists today between ASPSPs and TPPs continue, whilst ensuring that both parties play their role in the context of the consumer duty.
I'm going to stick with you for a few minutes because we're getting quite a lot of questions from the floor about sort of the vagueness of some of the language. And I know the FCA has said this is an outcomes thing, that you're not going to be completely 100% prescriptive. You must do it exactly this way. But there are sort of questions about sometimes the vagueness of what could be conceivable as a foreseeable harm. What a client might see as a foreseeable harm might actually not be an actual harm. It may not fly if it comes to the Financial Ombudsman Service or to the FCA. Other firms are worried that you're just, someone here asks if you're punishing the sector. Is this really an opportunity for them, or is it something that, you've just noticed that firms have been doing it wrong, so now you've had to take action? And sort of following on from that, how can firms move away from this idea that this is just going to be you waiting for them to crack down on them, and turning that into, this is actually an opportunity for you to grow? And I know that some other people here said they were excited about it, so I'll let you answer that question, and then we'll widen it out to sort of the opportunities that might come across as part of the consumer duty.
It's a broad question. It's a fair question. I think in reality, as a regulator, we will always be told that we are either doing too detailed, not detailed enough, too much, not enough, at the wrong time, too early, too late, etc., etc. So in reality, the way, and it is true, it's the same in the way I look at life. Whatever happens, whatever change you have to go through, I think you have to look at the opportunities in this change. I think it's fundamental. If you cannot look at opportunities in any change, and that includes regulatory changes, then you will never be proactive with that business and really drive something and use it in a way that helps you drive your own business and help your consumers. Who says that if you help your consumers and you put them in the center, there is a negative impact on you? I hope no one, from the perspective of, surely we're here to serve with products and services to the people that we are, that are our customers. So I think, to my mind, it's really fundamental to keep the right mindset in that sense. And I think this is actually quite linked to the consumer duty. Ultimately, this is about culture. And we talked a lot, I think Anne and Sam and Aman talked about a cultural shift. And I think that's true. I think it's also true that there is probably a bit of a journey, and it's not something that's going to happen just like that. But that's important. And I think that makes it even more valuable.
Yeah, I think that's quite reassuring, because, the FCA saying you appreciate it, it's a journey, might also give firms like a bit of breather, that if they're not quite ready on the 1st of August, you're not going to be immediately knocking on their door with sort of your enforcement stick. I've heard about the enforcement stick, it's a big one. But let's talk though a little bit more about the culture and the excitement. And you mentioned that word exciting. For you, what does consumer duty look like? What does good look like in consumer duty, and why is it exciting for you? And I'm also going to then take that question to Sam and Aman, just to kind of tie this all together, because we're almost out of time.
I really like it when someone understands what I want and helps me do that. I think the days when you've got to do a search for the product that you want, and you've got to spend a lot of time, read a lot of information which you may or may not understand, are over, and I'm excited about that. I think when I read that 1 in 7 adults in England have got literacy levels between a 9 and 11-year-old, I'm excited by the idea that they are also getting the opportunity to understand and get the right products for them, which has been quite difficult in the past. And I'm excited to see colleagues in banking getting excited about a regulation. It doesn't often happen, but actually when you really talk to them about what this means and about how it impacts the customer and how they're going to help them, they actually get really excited. They're not interested in the product focus. They love the idea of actually just helping people. I think everyone wants to make sure that those that need the most protection are getting it. This is helping them get there. So it's exciting times.
Oh, it is exciting. Without customers, we've got no business. So there you go. I'm going to go over to the room, the London Tower. I think they're coming up.
Well, I think, one of the things I would just add before we finish is, let's not get left behind in financial services, because, be aware that, Apple have bought, Credit Kudos last year, which is an open banking, real-time decisioning on credit business. And they switched all of their clients off because what they wanted was the tech. And let's just be aware that Apple already have an open banking, way into the data for all their customers, which they're now offering their credit card through. So, if that isn't a bit of a wake-up call to how you can get on and use this valuable data and drive, customer behavior, take a leaf out of Apple's book.
Yeah, absolutely. you do, Aman. Looks like you're going to be giving us the last word for the day.
I'm going to actually just touch on sort of like the employee element and the culture element, because somebody's just dropped in a final question. I think for me, there's so much we can do to really embed this into the culture and get the excitement going across the business. I also think that, you know, a lot of firms we talk to, and I've worked in operations myself, there can be frustration on the front line because they want to help customers, but sometimes they haven't got the tools to enable them to do that. So really enabling, providing knowledge tools, assistance, and for them to get it right first time for the customers, I think it's going to be hugely empowering and rewarding for them as well. So you'll have not only just happy customers, you'll have a happy workforce as well. So I think for me, I think it's, you know, put the customer at the heart of the organization, enable your people to support and deliver, and, you know, it's a win-win situation.
I think that's a wonderfully positive note to end on, something that's good for your company, for your colleagues, for your clients, and for the wider community. Consumer duty, it might be a journey, but it's definitely one worth embarking on. Well, sadly, that is all we have time for on this. The campfire is burning low. We're about to start toasting our marshmallows. Sam, Aman, Anna, and Helene, thank you ever so much for talking to us today. Really appreciate that, for the insightful views and practical tips you've given. And thank you also for listening and for all these amazing questions that were coming in. I'm sorry if we didn't get time to answer them all, but and we haven't even got drinks afterwards. So you can't collar us in the corridors. But thank you very much, and I'm going to pass you back over to Helen.
Simone, absolutely fabulously hosted. Thank you very, very much. You look like you enjoyed that. And the feedback we've had from our audience is you're an absolute natural. So please, please come back. Ladies, I would like to thank each and every one of you, Anne, Helena, and it is wonderful to see Aman and Sam together in Salesforce Towers. And I have got a cheeky suspicion that they will be having a drink very, very shortly. Please have one for us. It is wonderful to see an all-female panel, actually, and it's a shame that I have to call that one out. At OBE, we are on an absolute mission to pass the mic to females, so a very, very special one for me, so thank you again. For our audience, they've been able to see the Slido poll at the side of their screens. We will be sharing those answers on LinkedIn and across all of our channels. So thank you very, very much for our audience for watching, for engaging with sending in their questions, and for the Slido panel. We will be publishing blogs from our audience, again, across LinkedIn and on our website. And of course, we will be tracking the countdown. So please do tune in for more on that. All that remains for me to say is thank my team, the OBE team, absolutely amazing. Behind the scenes just recently, they've really had to step up to the mark because I've been away, haven't been well. And I want to publicly say thank you very, very much for each and every one of them, particularly for Kaylee, who everybody's seen in the green room. She and all of the team, Catherine, everybody really do make this happen. So ladies, behind the scenes, thank you. A big heartfelt thank you this month for me. So all that remains for me to wish you the very, very best of health, and I will see you very soon. Thank you very much. Bye for now.